Okay, wonderful. Welcome, everyone. My name is Magnus Liu. I'm the project manager here at PKP, and I started in August just last year, and I'm working on Open Research Europe as well as other initiatives within within PKP. So our topic today is advancing open journal infrastructure with Open Research Europe, which we also call ORE or ORE. So we have we have a subset of the Open Research Europe team here at PKP to present. Juan is going to talk to you about the little bit of the background of ORE and as it relates to PKP. And we have the dev team here online to talk about the new features that ORE brings to OJS. Devika is going to talk about user research and how it relates to feature development, as well as different opportunities that you'll have to input your feedback as we work through the scope of ORE. And then I'm going to give you highlights of the roadmap and show you some of the current activities, as well as point to some areas of reference where you can look to see a little bit of the background information and also where you can keep track of our activity as we go through, as we progress through the design and development and testing of the project.
Sorry, Magnus, we don't see your slides. Did you start sharing the screen?
You don't see my slide? Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. Okay, so I'll hand it off to Juan.
Great. Thank you, Magnus. All right, so welcome everyone. It's really great to see such a great turnout. I think reflects, the excitement that I've been sort of feeling in the last couple of trips that I've been doing, in particular to Europe. The excitement that I think people have been feeling around PKP having been awarded this work and having the opportunity to develop the platform that will be underlying the ORE platform. So I think most of you that are here, I imagine, are already familiar enough with PKP, and you have a sense of what the ORE platform is. But just as a recap for anyone that has just sort of come on and was curious around what it is that we were talking about with this ORE acronym, is that the Open Research Europe platform is the open access publishing platform that is being funded and supported by the European Commission. It is a platform that operates with no fees, is a free publishing platform, has been primarily for publishing work that is funded by Horizons Europe program. I put there for now because there's an expansion into other funders also being able to come on board as well and being included and having their work also published using this platform. And the platform puts forward a model that is not sort of the traditional journal publishing model, but rather one in which there is immediate publishing. And in that sense, it operates as something some people can post immediately. So it's sort of like preprints. But and they make a point of pointing out that it's not a preprint server, because everything that gets published on the ORE platform gets posted immediately, but it's also sent out for review. And then there is a post-publication and an open peer review that takes place. There's some nice sort of elements of this model, which is that the authors sort of they have the ability to continue to update their publication and post revisions of those publications. Like I said, all of the reviews are published openly, so it is a form, and I think it's not quite the publish, review, curate model that we might be hearing or elsewhere, because everything is published onto the platform, but it operates on that same premise that everything, like I said, it's immediately published. It can be done, and then authors sort of have the ability to continue to revise and improve those manuscripts. So it's sort of I would say innovative model, though it has been around for quite some time. But importantly, it's a model that operates with no fees, and in that sense, it's a diamond open access publishing platform. Let's move on to the next slide. I want to put this in the context, and I think I literally just came back and I saw that Johan is here, and I think there's other folks here as well that were from the launch of the European Diamond Capacity Hub. But I want to put the context of the Aura platform within larger efforts that have been done to support Diamond Open Access in Europe. And I've put these sort of roughly from left to right in the order that these things have sort of emerged. There's the OA Diamond Journal study that sort of kicked off, I think, what has been a flurry of activity in Europe around supporting Diamond Open Access publishing. That was followed up by the Action Plan for Diamond Open Access that sort of laid out some of the vision for things that could be done. And then two European Commission funded projects, the Diamas and the Craft-OA projects that have been sort of laying the groundwork around really gathering the European community around setting standards, looking at the kinds of supports, exploring the different models, being able to identify and study and understand the extent of journal publishing, of diamond journal publishing in Europe. And then the Craft-OA project also trying to help to support the building of some of that infrastructure. I literally just came back 2 weeks ago from the launch of the Almasi project, which is the third project that's sort of building on these pieces and the work that has been done by both Diamas and Craft-OA, and to continue to build around the resources and the greater understanding and supports for Diamond Open Access publishing in Europe. And then I said that was also combined with the launch of the European Diamond Capacity Hub, which you'll see the link to in the chat if you want to go to start seeing that. So that was officially launched, still in beta, but is a way again for trying to have some kind of collective supports that can be put in place to ensure the richness and the health of the diamond publishing ecosystem. Let's go to the next slide. Sort of in parallel to those activities, and those it's European Commission sort of supported projects that they've laid out those pathways for creating those granting mechanisms to really make sure that Diamond Open Access does well. The European Commission has also moved sort of in parallel to begin to move this Aura publishing platform, which is, like I said, a diamond publishing system, but was not being operated on open source software. And so there was a commissioning of some of the requirements of what it would take to move the Aura platform to being operated on open source. And in that independent expert report, I would say sort of OJS sort of did very well. After this report, there was the tender that the PKP submitted the tender to try to compete to be able to be the organization that built the publishing platform, and have chosen and were successful at suggesting that OJS could be that foundation for that work. So if we go to the next slide, I'll say also in parallel, and this is sort of outside of the European, but this is what PKP has been doing, is that PKP has been actively trying to support and lay out the ways in which open journal systems has been supporting the Diamond ecosystem. Our latest count, we're estimating now we're over 55,000 journals using open journal systems. These are journals spread sort of around the world. Some of these things, this is just things that are published, actively publishing using OJS without us sort of digging into exactly what is in that content, but it's continuing to grow year to year, the amount of journals that are using the platform. And we're about to actually conduct, I'm just in the process of loading up some surveys to try to get a greater understanding of exactly how many of the journals using OJS are operating on a Diamond model. As the growth of OJS has sort of ballooned in recent years, we're starting to lose track of exactly, having a greater sense of how many of those are Diamond, but we do believe that the vast majority of them are operating under a Diamond, no fees, and no article processing charges, mostly run by the scholarly community themselves. So we've put out not just statements, but also laying out the ways and trying to contribute to the conversations to say, how is it that the journal publishing platform is supporting the Diamond publishing ecosystem. I'll say, if we go to the next slide, just to say that what we have seen here is that the European Commission granting and moving to open source software, and in particular having chosen PKP as being the foundation, is that support that is now that's been created for having OJS be supported as being the foundation for open Research Europe platform, is a way of basically saying that that support is a way of supporting Diamond Open Access publishing around the world. This has been in part, and this is what's going to be laid out, I think, in the following presentations. What you're going to hear is that it really has been the way in which we have chosen to try to build the Open Research Europe platform, but really by building on top of OJS without forking, without separating out what is happening with OJS, so that every feature that we're building into OJS for the Open Research Europe platform will be available to all journals. And so all of those 55,000 journals will have at their disposal all of the features that we're building into ORE. This is, again, a way of thinking around the supports that are being put in place to make sure that the Diamond ecosystem is something that can be successful, and making sure that there's tooling available. And we see that OJS essentially is providing a service to these journals by making sure that all of those journals will be able to operate with an immediate publishing model, with open peer review, but also more broadly, all of the enhancements and things, and you're going to hear about those in the following presentations, are a way of ensuring that that PKP and OJS continue to be at heart and a foundational support for these thousands of journals around the world that are trying to be able to make their content open access without charging for fees. So with that, I think I turn it over so you can hear about exactly what are some of these enhancements. But the key thing that I want to emphasize here, and again, you're going to hear this throughout the presentations, is that this support that are being put in place and what we will be building here are features that are going to be available not just for the ORE platform in that one place, but actually it will be things that will become available for all of our community.
Great, thank you, Juan. Okay, next we'll move into, the dev team with Alec, Eric, Vitaly, and Parth, and talk about some of the new features that ORE brings to OJS.
Thanks, Magnus. And I will jump in here. We're just going to highlight 3 features that we're working on. I would suggest that folks are welcome to follow through on some of the GitHub links that we have in these presentations, but also join us during our quarterly Dev Leads meetings. Those are where we focus on some of the really specific features and some of the technical developments. Our next one of those is February the 18th. So you should see an announcement on the website about those. And with all of this, we're going to refer out to GitHub and various other resources for more detailed information. If you're interested in these features, please participate on the support forum if you're not sure where to go. In GitHub, if you're able to find the right spot there, we're happy to have generic questions, specific questions. And Devika in particular is involved in a number of different design exercises to kind of prove out these things. So while we're targeting ORE for these features, and we have a really specific workflow there to meet, we're, as Juan was saying, really trying to make sure that we generally improve OJS and as much as possible use generic features that are going to be of use to the whole scholarly publishing community to serve the needs of ORE. So in that sense, a rising tide lifts all boats. We were very fortunate to get this tender and project with ORE, but we're doing it in a way that's going to definitely make features available to everyone. So just to, again, speak from the dev team's perspective a little bit on the distinction between ORE and OJS, the launch of ORE is going to be in 2026. That's now less than a year away. And it's going to be using OJS 3.6 as the basis for it. So we're about to release OJS 3.5. That'll be our next LTS release. That's hopefully this quarter. And then we're going to be working hard on 3.6 as the release in 2026. In fact, we're already working on a number of features that will go to 3.6 as well. The ORE launch is going to be a combination of, as Juan was alluding to, new features built into OJS and available to everybody, but also a lot of configuration of features to suit ORE's requirements. The ORE workflow is fairly specific. There's a number of different checks and things that need to be walked through that don't apply to all OJS users. So we're, again, trying to generalize those features to make sure that the feature is generic, the deployment and configuration for ORE is specific, and that everyone can use those features. And so, in fact, the amount of ORE-specific development is going to be really limited. We're going to develop, a specific theme for ORE, and a number of small tweaks like that. But for the most part, it's generic software that's going to be applied to the ORE use case. Some of the features that are required for ORE will require better than basic hosting. One thing that we really try to do with OJS and all of our software is make sure that there's very, very low barriers to entry. Essentially, you can deploy OJS and use it for an institutional host or even a national host, and there are a number of folks out there doing that. But we also want it to scale down to a small deployment on commodity web hosting at a number of dollars a month. And so we really try to make sure that we don't require any features that are not available to that sort of basic hosting. However, there are some features that are a little more advanced that will require additional software support on the server side for the ORE project. And so we, in the past, have integrated those using plugins. So the baseline OJS will remain very low barrier to entry, but for some of the features like conversions and so on, there will be some server-side requirements that will be a bit more advanced. This is a bit like we've done with Lucene for search engine in the past. There's a built-in OJS search engine that's fairly basic, but when you hit a certain level of content or a certain set of requirements that are beyond that basic level, a server-side plugin and server-side support are available to apply it more broadly. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, we have 3 subjects to highlight for today. Again, I'd recommend that that anybody who's interested in these, please join the DevLead seminars, look through the GitHub entries, get yourself a bit more detail on these. We're going to try and touch on them at a fairly high level, but this should give you a sense of these 3 features, what we're working towards. We're just picking 3 out of a hat. There's a lot of stuff going on right now with the dev team, but it's too much for us to be able to walk through during 1 hour. So I'll pass it over to Eric to talk a bit about open peer review first.
Thanks, Alex. So today I'll be talking about 3 of the main features to come in terms of open peer review. And I'll talk about these in the context of what these will look like, how they will impact the OJS workflows, and how the existing traditional workflows will be maintained. So the short answer is, for what these will look like, is if anyone is familiar with the existing ORE platform, we'll be retaining these existing features. So what are these? These are post-publication open peer review, which is only a few words, but actually encompasses quite a lot, as I'm sure all of you know. So specifically, this will support a publish first, review after workflow. So items will first be published and then reviews will be solicited. And an example of how this works in the ORE context is something will then be considered peer reviewed when it has met a certain threshold of reviews. This is something that will be customizable in OJS, but for the ORE context, this is 2 approved reviews or 2 approved with reservations and 1 approved. And this can exist on a per review round basis. So once a new version comes out or there are responses to it, it can then go through the peer review process again. And this can happen iteratively ad infinitum. The second major feature to come around open peer review is the public visibility of author responses. So currently in OJS, we have something we call open review options as opposed to anonymous and double anonymous. But what this means is that it won't just be visible in the backend editorial, it will be open and viewable for anyone to see. These will also be co-located with the reviews and the work revisions, so you'll be able to see at a glance the entire context of the review process in one place on the main page. And finally, this will also include public comments. So this will be support for public comments as distinct from reviews in a comment thread style on a per publication version basis. So if we could go to the next slide. So how will these impact the OJS workflow? So with introducing the post-publication peer review, this is the biggest disruption to the OJS workflow. And here I have a diagram that has come out of work of previous PKP sprints, and it's what we're calling the constellation of peer review. But here we have all of the different types of ways in a simplified diagram of how things can exist in peer review and all of the steps along the way and all of the things we would need to consider. So the important thing to know in the OJS context is OJS will have more options on how peer review in varying degrees of openness will be supported. And this will also encompass improvements to peer review related metadata for downstream consumption, for example, DOIs for peer review and author responses, an option to include more peer review data in things like the OAI PMH protocol, Crossref, DataCite, ORCID, etc. So I won't go over this in constellation of peer review diagram in detail, but it will be available afterwards. But the important thing to note here is this is a very large, all-encompassing description of how different peer review models can work. And if we can go to the next slide, these red arrows more or less show the existing OJS peer review workflow. So to answer the question of how the existing workflows will be maintained, they will still exist. The new workflows will be options. So all three of the primary peer review related features will be enhancements or options to these existing workflows, and nothing that I've described will be mandatory in any way. So with all of these different workflows, we will be able to have more options for making peer review items available while not restricting the current existing workflows. So we'll be adding more options. And that's something that we're quite excited about because it will be a big change, especially with the introduction of post-publication reviews. And that will, in some ways, completely upend all of the things that OJS is capable of. So in its current iteration, it more or less supports this golden path with the red arrows. But with the ORE and related enhancements, basically any question on this diagram, you will be able to go to there for the ORE work. Next, I will hand it off to Alec to talk about preprints.
Thanks, Eric. All right, so preprints in OJS, and this is a thing I've gotten a number of questions about, so I want to kind of spend a few minutes talking through this. So starting with OJS 3.6, again, this is due for release in 2026. OJS will gain a preprint posting workflow. And the way we're approaching this is to build on the existing article versioning tools, which you'll see if you've been using OJS. I think we started with 3.2 with versioning. That feature where you can post subsequent revisions of an article. We're going to extend that to make use of the NISO Journal Article Versioning, or JAV standard, which basically defines a vocabulary for what stage a posting or publication is in, whether it's author's original, whether it's version of record, and then introduces a standardized versioning tool set. And this is one of those great standards that comes along when the field is kind of experimented with a few different approaches and tries to unify the approach into a machine-readable standard vocabulary. And when NISO comes along with one of these, it makes me very happy because it allows for us to work towards a specific goal instead of trying to improvise based on the folks that we know and work with. So previously, OJS had the ability to version kind of linearly. Every version was a version of record, basically, but you could revise. And now we're extending the existing versioning tools to add this new NISO journal article versioning tool set. Next slide, please. So versioning in stages. I referred before to the kind of development of this stuff in GitHub. I know that a lot of folks, when they see a GitHub entry, they interact with it, they feel like they might be putting their hand in the meat grinder in that they might not feel like they've got enough background in software to be able to participate. I would encourage anybody who's curious or interested, please do feel free to jump in there and ask a question, even if you think it's a basic question. There's also the support forum if you feel like that's a safer place to start. But in general, our user community is a lot of folks who don't have maybe a sufficient technical backing to be able to write software, but they are doing software-ish things. And a lot of them feel this way, that they don't have the backing to be able to participate the way that they should. That's not atypical, and I'm really happy when I see folks engaging. So if you want the full details, that's the issue where to look. There's a link to a mock-up, basically, of the feature. And I'm going to show a couple of screenshots from that just to kind of give you a high-level tour, but there's a lot of details there. We are trying with these new features to standardize how we present the GitHub issues. And so you'll see if you go there, the very top of the page, the listings can be quite long, especially if it's a work in progress. You'll see lots of people kicking code back and forth. But at the very top of the page should be a summary of the specification. And that should, evolve to adapt to new use cases and so on. It should be a place where you can land and kind of see what our target is for a feature. So this number 4860 is the link to the feature that we're developing versioning in stages in. As I mentioned, in OJS 3.5 and older, it was a linear thing, version 1, version 2, version 3. Starting with 3.6, every version is now going to have a stage. For example, the stage could be the author's original version, it could be the version of record, and that will distinguish between, let's say, a preprint, the author's original upload that's being posted somewhere, and an actual journal article that's post peer review. There's also a version numbering approach that's introduced with the NISO JAV standard, which distinguishes between major and minor revisions. This is a new addition as well. And this takes from the software practice of semantic versioning. So 1.0 would be a major version, 1.1 would be a minor revision, 1.2 minor revision, 2.0 another major revision. So every version now has that concept added as well. Next slide, please. So here's, I've taken just a few screenshots from the mock-up that Devika's put together. I'll credit Devika for this, and the mock-up there you can find on the GitHub issue and click through to interact with the feature in kind of a draft form. So this is a design that she's just recently introduced with a lot of work from various parts of the team. Again, this is an extension of the existing versioning tools. So if you've used those tools, you'll see that we've moved the user interactions with that feature to a different spot on the screen, but this does extend on that existing feature. So if you've worked with the submission workflow before in OJS, you'd be used to working with versioning tools sort of in this area of the screen. You can create a new version, you can look at different versions metadata, and so on. We've now moved that tool set down to the publication area here. So there's a listing of versions. Currently in this submission, there is the one version which is called unassigned. It's kind of a placeholder label. And within that version, that's where all the metadata exists, the contributor lists, titles and abstracts, etc. And the body text, which of course we'll be seeing a little bit later on, some talk about the body text editing. And this is similar to what OJS has always done. In fact, the title, the abstract, the contributor lists, because those can vary from version to version. Version 2 might, for example, add a forgotten author. It might correct a piece of metadata. Those have always been assigned with the version and not with the article. We do, as a convenience, of course, show the article title at the top of the page, but that is the title that's associated with the most recent version of the publication. So the versioning tools are now moved to the left-hand side, and there's a new feature, a new presentation of the Create a New Version button to go along with that. And in this mock-up, you see only a single version has been currently created. It's called this unassigned version because there is no publication stage attached to it. That'll make a bit more sense with the coming slides. Next slide, please. So let's just say that we are, and this feature is going to be developed in much more detail later on. So don't worry too much about this send file to text editor. Long story short, this is just a way of moving the body text from the Word document into the text editor. Again, we'll touch on that in a minute. What I wanted to show is the way that we associate stages and versions with a bunch of metadata, with a submission version. This is the current draft set of terminology that the NISO JAV standard proposes for naming a stage of a publication. So let's say you have a submission that's got a preprint form and then incubates into a journal article form. It might be that the submitted manuscript or the author's original are the ones that indicate a preprint, but then as the submission goes through the various stages of workflow, eventually it'll become a version of record. And you can create a version and post or publish that version arbitrarily as the submission workflow kind of progresses. So you'll be able to make the workflow as transparent as you want, or you'll be able to continue to move forward with just the traditional OJS workflow, which will have you establishing a version of record and posting just that, and maybe revising it with subsequent versions. Next slide, please. Once you've assigned, so this we've chosen some sort of preprint workflow. Once we've done that, we're able to assign also the major versus minor revision, and this will establish whether the version is 1.0 or 1.1 or 2.0. And that's a new indication, again, from the JAV standard that allows you to distinguish between let's say a metadata revision, a typo being corrected, that sort of thing, versus a major revision, even a retraction, that type of thing. This is a really good thing that the NISO JAV standard introduces, because we found that editors have been a bit hesitant to use the versioning tools. If they're just making a minor correction, then they would prefer to unpublish the submission, modify the metadata, and republish it, which is not a good practice. I think what we'll see is as the publishing culture moves to better acceptance of quick and easy revisioning of the submission and a little further away from the kind of print history publication, we'd like to see them basically versioning everything. So they'll use a minor revision to make a minor correction and do that without the kind of stress that I think has historically been part of the revision process. All right, next slide. So this is an example where we have two versions now. So we have this unassigned version and we have this accepted manuscript. So this represents two opportunities for the journal manager or editor to make the workflow transparent by publishing these and posting them so that they're visible to the end user. But again, this is strictly optional, and these can be kept as a workflow feature for only the editor to work with, or they can be scheduled for publication and made public. And if you go through scheduling publication, if you haven't assigned a stage to something, it'll walk you through confirming that so that they'll be able to confidently assign version numbers, indicate major and minor revisions, assign a stage, and it'll be published accordingly. All right, next slide, please. So we've had the question a few times about this preprint workflow in OJS and where that leaves OPS, Open Preprint Systems, as a piece of software. And the long story short is that OPS serves a slightly different purpose, and we'll continue to develop it. The very good news is that the software that we mainly produce, OJS, OMP, and OPS, they share so much code that when we make an improvement for one piece of software, it tends to apply to all three. So many of the features that we're developing for Open Research Europe that are improvements to OJS are also going to be available in OMP and to a slightly lesser extent, OPS, and to a slightly lesser extent, OMP. The only caveat there on OMP is that body text editing and typesetting for books is so different. I'm being a bit cautious about promising that that set of features is going to go directly into OMP as well. Essentially, even though we're talking about OJS for the ORI project, this will result in major improvements to both OPS and OMP. But long story short about the distinctions between the preprint workflows in both packages, OJS is for cases where you want to expose the workflow that a journal type publication, you want to expose the workflow that a submission goes through in order to make the research open early and to provide clarity and transparency in the process. But the preprint that is in the platform will incubate into a fully fledged journal article in that same platform. So you're mainly hosting a journal platform. You want to make the research available early, but it is going to turn into a journal article in that same platform. Whereas the OPS use case tends to be for thematic or regional preprint archives, where the research is made available early, but if it's going to be incubated into a journal article, that'll typically happen elsewhere. So two examples are the Sport Archive, which is a thematically organized preprint server, and then the J Archive, which I don't even know how to pronounce that, which is the Japanese archive, which is a regionally significant preprint archive. So there's no conflict between these two use cases, and there's no conflict between the dev team's attention in maintaining both applications. Our work on OJS will apply to OPS, and both will continue to serve needs that are disparate, but of course have closely related. Next slide. All right, I'm going to pass on to Parth next to talk about XML production. And before I do, I just want to give credit to the entire dev team. There's just a few of us speaking here, but this has really been a lot of work by the entire team, and just because the few of us are speaking, I don't want to detract from their credit.
Yeah, likewise. So the third feature that we wanted to highlight today is about the production of is really about the production workflow in OJS, which includes the production of HTML and PDF galleys, but also the production of XML files, namely typesetting of articles in a format called, in which could be in a number of different formats, but the one that we'll sort of focus on here today, and probably one of the most widely used one, is the JATS format, Journal Article Tag Suite, JATS format. So I think for us, especially a lot of our internal conversations, the word typesetting is sort of synonymous or connected very deeply to the use of this standard for JATS. And to, I think, walk through what we've been thinking about in terms of the production workflow, I wanted to kind of slice out these three steps of the production workflow, or really of the sort of article workflow inside of OJS. There's many more, and they are sort of cyclic, especially with this kind of introduction of the preprint feature. You can have a preprint, it can be reviewed, it can go back as a new submission is entered, and you can go through multiple rounds of reviews. So the sort of workflow itself is a lot more complicated, but there's these three features that I think I wanted to highlight and talk through today. Vitaly and I wanted to highlight and talk through today. Vitaly will talk about the last one, and I'll talk about the first two. And all of them will sort of be either significantly or slightly changed for OJS 3.6. So the article is uploaded. There is some editing that we are going to enable inside of OJS and typesetting. And then finally, HTML and PDF galleys are produced after this sort of editing step, and those can be posted publicly online, as well as any files that come from the typesetting stage, like a JATS marked up or annotated format for the article. So let's start with the first one on the next slide. So one of the changes, so at the moment that the author uploads their article, one of the changes that we plan to make in this new version of OJS, and this has sort of perhaps always been a feature that could have existed, but one of the things I think we want to highlight or center a little bit more is that there can be some automated features that happen when the article is uploaded. So the article upload could be the first step in the workflow, and there could be some metadata that is kind of automatically extracted from this. For example, using a tool like Grobid or using some other kind of markup tool. We expect, I think, that these will be plugins in the plugin gallery or take the format of plugins in the plugin gallery, but there's some metadata that can be kind of automatically extracted from the article at the import stage. The other thing that will happen is, the typesetting phase will apply to the body text of the article. So conceptually, I think we can think of the article perhaps in kind of maybe three different pieces. There's the metadata, the things like the authors and the title and the abstract. There's the body text, and there's the references. And they will live in separate places inside of OJS. So this first piece applies to kind of the metadata and the article. But the plan is also that, for the body text, there's some additional processing that can be done at this stage. We can identify where the body text is, and use, existing open source libraries, perhaps like Pandoc, to sort of find the body text and to, handle the kind of extraction of that portion of the article for the subsequent phase, which is editing and typesetting. And it's where I think I want to spend most of my time. So let's go to the next slide here. So in order to do typesetting inside of OJS, the plan is that OJS 3.6 will include an article editor. There's still a lot of open questions about what this could look like, a body text editor to be specific. There have been a number of different projects for JATS editing. And for editing of articles in JATS format, for typesetting of articles, and they have, to varying degrees, been successful. There were some early attempts like Libero and Texture, which are largely no longer being maintained. So the plan for OJS 3.6 is to include an editor that can edit articles in a sort of minimal HTML format, what we're calling a kind of minimal HTML format, with the idea that it sort of has a backwards compatibility or a forwards and backwards compatibility with the JATS vocabulary, so that journal staff can edit articles in HTML and export them to the XML format, and perhaps go back and forth between these two. I'll say a little bit how we thought about how we've kind of been thinking about the process, because I don't think are quite at the stage where everything is finalized and everything is sort of ready with this editor. So I'll say just sort of what the process has looked like so far. Maybe let's go to the next slide. So we kind of took a look at the entire landscape, including editors like Libero and Texture, which I alluded to earlier. And we sort of shortlisted, I guess, about 10 editor packages to sort of look into in a little bit more detail. This number, by the way, grows every day. We have a sort of really active group, which we've called the Production Workflows Working Group, which is members from the PKP community who are sort of continuously suggesting new frameworks and new editors to look at. But we kind of have sort of tried to shortlist a number of different editor packages and sort of apply the same thinking about their compatibility with OJS and their usefulness for this task to all of them. we've met with some developers and we've had sprints in Turin, and also we assembled this sort of virtual PKP production working group a few times. We sort of have a pretty constant dialogue with these people who are using the software to try and think about what editors, what packages exist out there that we could use as an editor. And here's the feedback that we've mostly gotten on the next slide. So the first is that there is a kind of preference, I think, in the community for among all of the editors that exist out there. There are some I think that can handle like very, very extensive amounts of the JATS vocabulary. But I think that what our community has sort of indicated is that they don't use all, I don't know, 2000 JATS elements in most of their typesetting needs. And so there's this pretty strong preference for a kind of much more sophisticated editor, a much more robust editor that can handle a kind of lower fidelity version of JATS. So the plan is, I think, to sort of phase in the support for more and more JATS elements, starting kind of with a small number of elements. I don't know exactly what that number is going to be, that we sort of steadily improve over time. But I can tell you a little bit about how we're thinking about figuring out what are kind of the most essential JATS elements in our community. For one, this is a kind of technical question in terms of what we can actually build and support in this editor. But this is also one that we are kind of looking to corpora that already exist out there. So we've been analyzing corpora from ORE, of course, but also from Cielo, from Redalyc, and from Coalition Publica. We're just sort of starting this process, so we're reaching out to these organizations, as well as looking for requirements for inclusion inside of PubMed Central and the JATS for Reuse standard. And so I think the goal is to sort of look at all of these, kind of come to a sense of what are the most essential typesetting elements and typesetting needs in our community, and then start there in terms of what we will support. So I'll pass it off to Vitaly now to take the last two pieces of this.
Thanks, Part. The initial plan is to support most commonly used elements in article body, like tables, figures, captions, footnotes, equations in MATML format, list sections, as well as inline elements like formatting, links, and citation. And as Part already mentioned, the references themselves would be contained in a separate part of the OJS. Next slide, please. And regarding production of JAWS-friendly HTML and PDF, the plan is that the editor we will be able to export from the editor HTML, which then could be used for PDF production together with CSS templates for individual customizations. And we are currently considering several tools that can be used for production of PDFs from HTML, and that includes such tools like Bibliostyle, which has a rich support for CSS styling, and the production of PDF in that case could be automatized, or PDF could be generated manually from HTML and CSS through the Bibliostyle viewer. And also, we are considering less robust tools like MPDF, which is currently maintained only in bug fixing mode, and can be used in simple server environments. So it won't require any additional dependencies apart from those that OJS requires. So that's it regarding typesetting and XML.
Great, thank you to the dev team for that. So we'll move on now to user testing and feature development. And Devika, would you like me to hand over screen share to you?
Yes, Magnus.
Okay.
I'll just. Thank you. I hope my screen is visible to you all.
Yes.
Perfect. So incredible work's been going on with everyone in the development team working super hard. But we've also sort of on the back end while working on these features, try to make our process so smooth so that there's more accountability, there's more no one comes into this, even a member of the community, blindsided by a new feature that's coming up, right? So while we were working on this, we were also working on a way to streamline our feature development process. So in this section, I'll be talking about the new process that we've been following, and also ways in which you all can contribute in this process, right? Um, so firstly, it's like a 5-step process, right? In the first step, like you can see, the process would begin with filing of an issue on GitHub, where all relevant information by the person would be put, right? And then all the stakeholders, which include you all from the community, can provide your input and along with some initial research, um, and just and then I will step in, and a few people from the dev team will step in to analyze that research and refine the requirements and define how the feature should work, right? The next bit would be the UI UX design and validation. So once everything's sort of streamlined, all the initial research has been analyzed, I will step in to start working on the UI UX design based on the insights, right? At this point, once I do have a design in place, I will conduct like a user research or usability testing to validate the design and address like any potential edge cases. So once finalized, the design specifications are uploaded for development. Once I walk you through this process, I will also show you like how the process has been looked like for one of the features. So once all the specifications and designs are uploaded, the feature actually goes into development, where a developer builds the feature based on the approved specifications. And we have increased the number of check-ins we have internally so that there's alignment and there's no back and forth between what are the functional requirements and what actually happens, right? Next bit is something we've been doing and I think is like working extremely well, and it's called the review by the 3 amigos. So once the development is complete, a review session would take place with the developer, the QA lead, the design lead, the project manager, and the team ensures that the feature meets the expectation before proceeding to testing. And once that's done, the next step is quality assurance and deployment, where the QA lead, which is Po, would conduct thorough testing to verify functionality, usability, and performance, post which any identified issues are resolved and before the feature is released. So I will just walk you all through one of these features. So if you can see, the feature that I'm walking you through is suggest reviewers at the time of submission. So the issue was filed, right? And once the issue was filed and the problem was described, a lot of people from the community and a lot of people from PKP commented on how this issue should work, what are some considerations we should be looking at. And there were like a lot of discussions, which also took place on Mattermost. And once everything was done and analyzed, I moved on to designing the issue and designing the feature. And once the feature was designed, we uploaded the specifications. So right now, on whichever issue you can always see on the top something known as a specs update with the latest date, which would show you everything which has been detailed out based on the initial research or even the user testing and how the feature should work. So this is how we've been going about with it, and like post which there's a developer who works based on all of these details And then there's a lot of thorough testing happening. So at any point of time, you can go onto the ORE project. I think Famira has shared the link on the chat, and you can find all the issues that we have, and especially look at the ones which are still to do or which still have specification in progress, so that we can catch your feedback early. So now moving on to where you all can actually step in, right? So the first bit is that you can provide your feedback or suggestion on how the feature can work by commenting on the GitHub issue, how I just walked you all through, right? Just go on the issue, look through all the discussions that are happening, and provide your feedback. Honestly, that takes us 1,000 miles ahead, and it really helps the team streamline the process as well, right? So that's step one. The other bit is, of course, once the UI UX design actually happens, to sign up via our sheet on the website to participate in user testing. So there is a place on our website where you could sign up for the user testing sessions. And once these are developed, I will reach out to you to participate in the user testing and provide your feedback. So these are just two of the main ways in which you all can contribute to this project. But of course, at any point of time, please feel free to reach out to us or even comment on the GitHub issues, so that we are always addressing everything in the issue. So yeah, that's it from me. I think I'm going to pass it on to Magnus to talk about the ORE roadmap. Thank you.
Thanks, Devika. Okay, so just a high level, high level overview of the ORE roadmap. So here I have target completions here, but really development, testing, and to a certain degree, design happens iteratively. So I have the completion here with the platform handover targeted for Q3 2026, along with documentation, manuals, code, etc. Here we have a view of sort of more of a near-term view. The project started in earnest in September 2024, primarily with study and in some cases requirements documentation in the ticket. So the focus on infrastructure, typesetting and JAS, and integration points primarily related to distribution. And looking to Q1, we continue some study, but move into design and development with theming as well. And then in Q2, Q3, we close off study and core design and move into development and iterative testing as well, with some theming continuing throughout. And so I want to sort of near time, so I just want to close off with some references. So I pulled a subset of tickets from the ORE project that these tickets were already in the PKP roadmap. They were just not scheduled. So the ORE for OJS puts these on the roadmap, and you can click in to see more details of the ticket. And also just speaking to what Alec and also Devika spoke to regarding tickets, you'll see more details, more consistency in the tickets as we move into 3.6 and ORE, including details now that we have Bo on for QA. You'll see more details, including testing requirements. So clear tests for testing, clear steps for testing, and a clear definition of done. And then we're also making use of the sub-issue functionality in GitHub. So tying tickets together in a visual way, it'll allow us to work on subtasks, and you'll be able to see the progress a little bit clearer. And as Devika mentioned, we're working to make sure that some of the tickets are, have they been in the system for a little while, and the goal is not to have to scroll through the entire scope of tickets to see where you're at. So we're working really hard on creating well-formed tickets in GitHub, and you'll see that more and more as we move into ORE 3.6. This is a reference slide, so a little bit of links to history, the bid announcement, feature summary blog post and on this website. And the top link there, a link to the overall GitHub project for ORI. Okay, so that wraps up our presentation. We have maybe a minute or so. If there are any questions, pull up the QA. And feel free also to raise your hand if you have any questions here.
The team has been answering questions as they
Yeah,
come up on the
wonderful.
Q&A tool. There's some very good questions there, a couple about upgrades, a couple about core notify, some about review and revisions. Thank you for those questions. Hopefully the answers help somewhat.
Great. Well, if there are no questions, then the presentation has been recorded. We'll make that available to you. And then please access the project through the link in the presentation and keep up to date that way. And please participate in the tickets and the conversation there. Thank you very much, everyone.
Cheers, everybody.